Our guest this week in the interview is the German Chancellor's representative for Africa, Günter Nooke. The topic is famine in East Africa and what can be done to alleviate it.
Mr. Nooke, you were recently with the Chancellor in Africa, including Kenya. Was the dramatic scale of the famine and drought evident at the time?
It was not clear how desperate the situation would become. But we did discuss with the Kenyan government the situation at the Dadaab refugee camp in northern Kenya. We also promised some further financial aid. We also stressed that a long-term solution to food shortages must be found. Agricultural development was a central theme of the trip for the Chancellor. And in Kenya, our Agriculture Minister, Ilse Aigner, who was with us, said Germany was prepared to support this kind of development.
Experts have been warning of a catastrophe like the one in East Africa for at least 2 years. Catastrophes like this don't just happen overnight. Why does the world only pay attention once thousands of people die?
We're all trying to answer that question. And when you see those pictures of starving children, perhaps it's better not to speculate about what should have been done. The main thing now is to get people the help they need. I want to make that absolutely clear. But I would also welcome an objective debate on what can be done, and specifically what African governments can do to help their own people. I would welcome such a debate here in Germany and in Africa. It may be hard to grasp, but the Horn of Africa is now experiencing extreme weather conditions. Not as a direct consequence of climate change, but certainly influenced by it as a contributing factor. And so we're seeing more droughts and floods.
No rain for 2 years.
We're dealing here with people who are small farmers, subsistence farmers, people who support themselves. They depend on rainwater to survive. Also, they have no way to store food or water. That's the situation we're dealing with. But in other countries, the state has systems in place to get food supplies to parts of the country that need them. And they set up water storage facilities. If, say, rain comes in infrequent torrential bursts, the problem is not a shortage of water, but the collection and storage of water. It's the same thing with food supplies. You can't let the supplies go bad while they're being transported. African states don't have these kinds of systems.
But nothing was done about this situation for the past 2 years. Some say the German government's offer of financial aid has come too late. Is that criticism justified? At this point, Germany has offered 60 million euros, but has it come too late?
No, I don't think that's the case. And I don't think there's too little money available right now. We're still having trouble getting food to the people who need it. We're not talking only about Kenya. The main problem is Somalia. It's a failed state. They have no government. And when people run out of food and water, they leave. They move to northern Kenya or Ethiopia, where the state still has structures in place, where there are refugee camps, and the UNHCR, the UN Refugee Agency, and the World Food Programme provide food supplies. It would be better if we had direct access to the people who need help, but the Islamist Somali militia Al-Shabaab won't allow it. The main thing is to get supplies to people quickly. The problems are not to do with a lack of money at present. It would be extremely helpful if the authorities in those countries were able to mobilize relief resources on their own. That's what's behind the development aid slogan, help people to help themselves. It's important for these countries to create their own structures.
Still, doesn't Europe, doesn't Germany have a moral obligation to provide more funding now?
We just doubled the amount of our funding from 15 million euros to 30 million. And we in the German government are certainly prepared to take further measures if necessary. I would rather not discuss the moral issues now. Though, of course, I do not want to see people die for lack of money. So I am in favor of more being spent on this. But I don't want to see us dealing with such problems only once the media start covering them. I want to see the nations of Africa develop to the point where they can decide for themselves how they're going to live. Of course, people can't live as they did a century or two ago, farming or raising cattle, and expect to enjoy all the advantages of modern society. Or have your son drive a moped taxi around town and still have enough to eat, unless you've built a functioning state.
Your point is well taken, but international development aid, including aid from Germany, has functioned mainly as short-term disaster relief. It hasn't done much to promote sustainable development in agriculture over the long term.
I disagree. If you look at the numbers, the Foreign Ministry budget for humanitarian aid is less than 100 million euros, but the Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development spends more than 6 billion euros a year, and most of that goes to sub-Saharan Africa. I think our development aid programs are doing a good job of dealing with these problems, creating stable structures, addressing issues of good governance, the rule of law, democracy, the protection of human rights. Though, of course, there's still a long way to go. Still, we have made some progress. I think that Germany's development aid compares favorably with that of other countries. Of course, all in all, development aid and cooperation needs to be improved. I would agree to that.
You've discussed the dramatic situation in Somalia and how the Islamist al-Shabaab militias ban international relief agencies from working there. Do you think there needs to be a diplomatic solution, a dialogue, perhaps involving a Muslim state, to create a partnership for international aid and cooperation?
Yes, that is what we need to do. The question is whether it's possible. Since 2008, 14 people working for the World Food Program have been killed in Somalia, just in Somalia, so the conditions are not favorable. Perhaps the African Union, with the backing of the international community, needs to raise the pressure. So we don't just see another transitional government with little power, but real state structures. Actually, there is a part of Somalia, Somaliland, that is doing quite well. It's not recognized as a sovereign state. That's always problematic. But it does have structures that function better than in the area where there's famine.
Es gibt durchaus Strukturen, die besser funktionieren als da in der Gegend, wo jetzt die Hungersnot vor allem ist.
Norway's foreign minister has said we have to talk to the Islamists. Should the international community do so? Could it lead to a split within the Islamist movement and to cooperation with elements within it?
Ich glaube, solche Fragen, wenn man das dann wirklich
If one is serious about such matters, I don't think they should be discussed in the media. They are criminals, but sometimes you have to talk to criminals. But with which ones? And can one split their group? I can't answer such questions. I don't know enough about the specific conditions there. We have to appreciate that in these countries, warlords and pirates and Islamist militias do enjoy a measure of popular support, because in the absence of a functioning state, they provide alternative structures and some stability. That makes it all the more difficult. The absence of a state does not necessarily mean total chaos. Rebel groups control certain regions, and aid organizations always have to negotiate with the rebel leaders. I already learned that 5 years ago. You have to call up and ask if they are fighting today, or can we send in our aid convoy? It's a myth to think nobody ever talks to these people. Even the most independent and neutral aid organizations talk to them.
Das ist eine Illusion. Das machen selbst die unabhängigsten, neutralsten Hilfsorganisationen.
Günter Nooke, thank you.
Thank you.